Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone.
We just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to our podcast. We're super passionate about this project and work for hours every week to bring you this content. So if you'd like to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Community, where we continue the conversations from these episodes. We'd love to hear from you.
This episode of Connected in Glass is sponsored by Diddy Clips. Diddy Clips has changed the way we film our glassblowing videos, and we're proud to be working with them. Today, we're interviewing Robert from Sigil Glass. They're a glass artist currently based in Tampa, Florida, who's been working with glass for over 6 years.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so we're so excited to get to know you. At first, maybe skip the glass part of your life. Just tell us a little bit about you, what you do for fun, and then start getting into how you started to work with glass.
I've listened to a couple episodes of the podcast, and I've noticed a throughout theme for most glassblowers is we all seem to like to garden when we're not behind the torch. I like to garden a lot. And when I'm not gardening or glassblowing, I'm either watching anime or gaming or following glassblowers who are being radicalized into right-wing extremism.
And so, how did you first start getting into glass?
It's a weird story, actually. I was in Asheville for my disability hearing, and I ended up missing my flight after the disability hearing, and I ran into this guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah, you can come stay with me." And he turned out to be a glass blower, and it's like, "Oh, this is really cool," like, because I use cannabis for my seizure disorder. So when I got back to Florida, I scrimped and saved and bought myself a National 6B in a little crock pot with some vermiculite, as all the OGs did, and just been organically growing from that point.
And so, currently, you want to tell us about your workspace?
Oh, I'm one of those loner artists. I get a little hobbit hole studio. I don't think I could ever actually have shopmates, because when I have worked in public studios, I generally just don't do anything until everyone leaves for the day.
And so, can you tell us how you like plan out your days? Do you follow along a schedule, or do you just kind of play it by ear?
No, I'm very impulsive, as most glass artists seem to be, so I don't ever really approach the day with any solid plan. I try to get out into the studio sometime after sunset, and I never really plan anything out. I just kind of freeform.
And can you talk a little bit about maybe your style of work and maybe the evolution of your style of work a little bit?
Yeah, I've always been more interested in the pattern side of glass blowing more than the shaping. Putting like really intricate and detail like into the actual prep work has always been the more like spark that I chase, versus the shaping side or like building complex like water movers.
How did you get to those technical skills?
I am partially self-taught. I don't think I actually took a real glassblowing class until I was like 2 years behind the torch, and I was on a Phantom.
When you did finally like start taking lessons, how did that go?
It was pretty cool because when you learn alone and when you learn through YouTube, you tend to pick up like very dirty habits, pulling stringers, leaving messes. And I think one of the most important parts of actually taking class was correcting a lot of those like misbehaviors on the bench that people can get like locked into. I think That's probably one of the biggest things I took away from an actual class. That and all the little bench tricks.
Can you tell us about how you would approach a day, like going to take a class and like be surrounded by people, or a day like when you wake up and you're going to go down into your studio? If that makes sense. I think
Yeah, I often don't find myself surrounded by glass blowers lately, especially with like the whole last 2 years of pandemic. I have severe asthma, so I mostly like work alone. And when you work alone, you have to have that like self motivation, or at least like a drive to chase. And generally, I kind of wake up and I'll hang out with the dogs for a little while, and I'll just head out into the glass studio. At which point, my horde of cats come out, and we all kind of just vibe. And depending what I'm getting into, some nights I'll just sit and pull latticino, or just sit and pull tons of stringers, or just get tons of blanks ready for Inside Out.
It sounds like mostly your love is like the prep part of it.
It really is. There's something about prep that it can become mind numbing, and you can just turn off for the day, which I really appreciate, especially since I like hang out in these really like muddy, nasty online spaces. Just being able to turn that off is like such a blessing.
Okay, so I know you said that you're kind of like a go with the flow person. Do you design the pieces that you're going to be working on before you're actually working on it? Or do you just like wing it?
So I've like pre-drawn and planned out so few pieces, it almost seems like a misnomer to even be like, yeah, no, I totally planned stuff out. No, I just literally throw shit together as I go throughout the night. I have a really weird brain because of a car accident I was in. So I can't really stay on task, which is one of the really nice things about glass blowing, is it's most of the time just one task straight through, stop to finish. So there's like no points in between to be like, oh, I should do this. So I mostly just flow, I would say.
Work with yourself instead of against yourself.
Exactly.
Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about your brain injury and kind of how that affected you?
Yeah, I have no issue talking about that. I think disability visibility is incredibly important, especially for people who are like me and don't have like a apparent and obvious disability. Like, it's been a weird thing with glass blowing. Like I said, I started my interest in glass blowing after meeting someone after going to a disability hearing.
Did that change the way that you even approached glass to begin with?
I don't really know about that, because like I never approached glass from the perspective of being able-bodied. I remember a class I took, I want to say it was Earl Jr. We were talking, and he's like, why would you get into glass blowing? Like, it's extremely difficult, especially, for even just able-bodied people, let alone someone who like seizures can be triggered by heat or exhaustion. And I was like, I don't know. It just seemed very interesting, and I was having issues with my hands immediately after the car accident. It was like a way to retrain my hands to work with my brain again. But it also became like a way to honor the medicine that like keeps me from having seizures as well.
And like when you're making things, what inspires you?
I try to look at nature a lot for inspiration, but I also try to look at I don't really know, honestly. That's a hard question to answer. Like, what inspires me? And I don't really know because, like I said, again, a lot of the designs I make, I like just pull from nowhere. I think that's one of the cool things about glass is just pulling things into existence. I think it's part of the magic of it is there's something not there, and then through sheer force and like you pulled it into reality.
Do you ever feel stuck as far as like your inspiration or flow?
Yeah, some days there's just nothing really there because like I don't like I love the repetition of prep, but I don't like the repetition of like getting stuck making the same item. You know, I started out doing a lot of like production contracts for different people, just like cranking out spoons, cranking out one hitters, cranking out steamrollers, and there's something that's nice about getting lost in that. But when you're actually like working on something using prep that you spent a day on, it almost seems like a waste to just repetitively create the same object using the same prep style, just in like a different, color variant. So on days I just don't have anything in me, I can, find myself back in that repetition of just like cranking out prep work or cranking out just like, small objects, pipes, steamrollers, and eventually it will come back. But it's hard when like what you do relies on, the creative process.
How do you sell your work? Do you sell it like through your Instagram, or do you sell it in other outlets around you?
I got very lucky a few years ago to meet my distributor. I've heard lots of like distributor horror stories from people, but I generally really like my distributor. She treats all the artists she represents pretty damn well.
It's nice not having to like think about marketing yourself.
It is. There's a lot of processes of like the glass blowing world that revolve around not blowing glass, photography of your piece, sitting answering endless DMs of people window shopping, which is no problem, we sell luxury items. It's just nice to actually spend the time blowing glass versus selling the glass.
Do you ever have a problem like putting yourself out there in that way though? Like you do have like you're on Instagram, you have really nice like pictures and videos, and like you put a little bit of work into it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, Instagram for me is just it's like a portfolio, digital portfolio, and it also lets me like create a community. That's mostly what Instagram is for me. But yeah, I'll use the Instagram, but I feel like it's a very dying platform, especially in the last 2 years with all the like shadow bans, and so I never wanted a third party social media app to be like tied to whether I eat. So I mostly use Instagram just to like dick around, shit post, do my little Unhinged Tuesday thing, post some like quotes in pretty glass.
So like taking kind of like a wild swing, I was like just going through my list of questions, and one question that we haven't asked that is like bringing it back deep again though. Anxiety and depression are like huge parts of Christina and I's lives. So I always like to ask if the people that we're interviewing share that in some way or another, and how they cope with it if they do.
I mean, of course, who isn't like a big ball of anxiety these days, or just in general? I struggle with depression. Obviously, I have a brain injury, so that affects my mood quite often. We have like this. It's a very toxic trait in the glass community of this like hustle. If I'm not behind the torch 12 hours a day, I'm not doing shit mindset. That Gary V drive. I gotta make this money. I gotta work. you know, and I think that is fucking horrible. There's so much more going on than like that flame. It's okay to get out there like 6 hours, but you gotta take time for that self-care and just enjoy what's around you. Like you can get so caught up like cranking out hundreds of spoons that you don't do anything. You don't live. And I think there's this separation that needs to occur from art and that capitalist drive to like compete to be the best, in the essence of like, I make the $100,000 rigs, or I make the $1,000 rigs, I make the fancy glass. I think that's another thing that is really weird to me about the cannabis and glass community in general, is there's like a flex culture that also occurs, with the art, the medicine. I have a whole bunch of weird feelings tied up in that. That definitely infects my depression and anxiety.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
No problem.
I kind of want to get into the your Tuesdays, but I
Feel
don't know
free.
how.
I mean, I do like a weekly show. It's mostly screenshots because like occasionally I'll write on the screenshot, but I never really want to directly address it because I feel like it's a lot of wasted energy to attempt to debate or fight with these people, because obviously there's a quote, and forgive me if I paraphrase it wrong, but there's a time to stop trying to educate those who refuse to get it, and rather than do that, it's more important to organize with those who already get it. Like I said, I do a weekly show, and the whole goal is just to share information. Information is one of the most powerful tools we have as like a community to protect ourselves. No one's going to protect us, I hear horror stories from female class artists all the time about the unchecked misogyny. The like, hey, I'll teach you this, but you got to do this. And I think every woman listening right now knows exactly what I mean by you got to do this, especially in glass. And I think silence is violence. Like it's just something that's true. So Unhinged Tuesday, I've just, when the pandemic started, a lot of people started going mask off. It was very weird. A lot of my very close friends like started getting radicalized into these crazy rabbit holes, So Unhinged Tuesday for me just became like rather than sit and just twiddle my thumbs and not really do anything, it was at least something.
Being a disabled person and having your friends feel that way must be a lot to unpack.
Oh, it sucks. I've had folks tell me I'm a coward for wearing a mask because they get asthma as well. It's just been a very weird 2 years.
Yeah. I forget what Brene calls it, but I think it's like she's saying we're in like collective grief right now, or collective trauma from COVID. And I was like, oh my God, yes, like I can feel this,
Yeah, it is. COVID was a like globally traumatizing event.
Right.
And like a lot of us still haven't really fully processed the last 2 years.
I would argue that most of us haven't.
It's not even over yet. So like,
Oh yeah.
how can we process it? Like, you know what I mean? Like we're still in it.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that maybe we didn't ask you yet?
We have like stuff we don't talk about in the glass community, like substance abuse problems. I know a lot of like old time glass blowers. It's mostly like where I learned how to do production work. And they tell you these horror stories of like, oh, champ, before the internet, you had to just like meet these random fucking people to learn how to blow glass. And like you never knew what the fuck you were gonna get. Even in the age of the internet, like we all have issues and our own vices and our way of dealing with those issues and said vices. It just feels like there's a lot of things that we just don't talk about. when it comes to like that, like mental health issues and substance abuse issues. It's really weird. At one point, in the last like year, a lot of people like took a very like pro drug war stance when it came to like harm reduction in the broader community. And I feel like a lot of the societal pressures that we've had in the last 2 years have like, they exist obviously everywhere, but in certain communities they seem to be far more amplified. And I feel like, again, like I was talking about silence, we don't talk about these things. I feel it's really important to just start these conversations. A lot of people have a tendency to just ignore that, when really we should maybe like, hey, you want to go to a meeting or something? It's just, we don't talk about things, and when we don't talk about things, we allow those things to like fester, whether it be substance abuse or online radicalization or a culture of like sexual assault, which like I've people send me things because they know I'll post it and I'll talk about it and I'll protect their anonymity. And I think one of the big takeaways I want to really impart is like, we need to like talk about stuff. We need to pull these things into like the forefront, into the light, and also like maybe fucking take a day off. Don't turn yourself into a fucking product. I forgot who, I saw a shirt recently and it said labor is a life destroying act. Maybe just be lazy for once. Fuck off in the shop. Do something different than cranking out the same fucking piece.
That was so good.
Mm-hmm. We appreciate you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.